said, yeah, I'm a cinematographer. And he said, yeah, but what do you really do? What do you do for work? Other people's successes are not your failures. And I think I started, whatever that was kind of hit me, and I started to kind of come around. Cinematographer, work in TV, feature films, commercials, music videos, documentary, a little bit of everything. I went to film school, and coming out of film school, you meet the people that you're in film school with, and you start shooting each other's projects and making things with those people that you're in school with. They become like the beginnings of your kind of network. And making short films. I was in Vancouver, so I was kind of just doing all the short films, all the free jobs, all the things I could do to get on whatever set I could. And then I started working with a cinematographer who was a few years older than me, James Liston, who kind of brought me in and brought me along to every job that he was doing. And I was working in lighting and sometimes in camera, but I was a terrible camera assistant, so more in the lighting side. And then I kind of continued on doing a lot of lighting in Vancouver, while also kind of pushing to shoot my own stuff. But those opportunities are harder to find when you're first starting out, so you're kind of doing the freebies and the little things and things with your friends as you start out. I did a lot of short films, and part of that is also like meeting the directors that you like, and you're test driving how those relationships are and finding the people that you connect with, and hopefully then those directors, as they go on to make bigger projects, you have that relationship, so you come on to those. One of my first feature films was a film called Molly Maxwell, and I had made short films with that director, Sarah St. Ange. So that was sort of a big leap, and kind of every step that you take gives you the next step up. So once I'd done that feature film, that kind of gave me the credits to then go and do another feature film that, and those kind of build on each other. But the nice thing about that at that time was I was not working a lot, and I was, very looking for work. But the one thing that you have when you don't have work is time. And so Sarah and I, not even knowing if the film was going to go, we spent every day of a winter kind of prepping for this feature, so that when it did happen, we were both ready. And really went in there this is our plan. We have everything shot listed. We had photo boarded things. We had really talked about everything. So when the opportunity came, we were kind of ready to do it. I think the thing about networking is I didn't really realize that I was doing it, and I'm happy for that. I think the times that I kind of capital N networked, it really felt off for me just as a person. I felt uncomfortable kind of chasing things or trying to go after somebody that I didn't know. And so I didn't really do that very much. But now looking back on the past 20 years, I realized that I've been networking this whole time, that every time you're on a job or you're at a film festival or whatever that is and you're meeting people, you're creating your network and your community. I remember I was very lucky in one of the short films that I had done just outside of film school. We played at TIFF, and I went to the festival, and you meet all the other filmmakers in those short film programs, and over the years some of those people I'm still in touch with. I now do commercials with a directing duo that I met then, and that was 2006 or something, and it took many years before we connected again to kind of make work real these commercials or things. But slowly you're kind of building all these things, and those were people that I met, and I never thought of it as networking. It was, these are friends, we're having fun, we're hanging out together, as opposed to, hi, I'm Catherine, I'm a cinematographer, hire me kind of thing. That always felt really gross to me. I haven't done a lot of cold calling. I think there's been a couple times in my life, there was a film that I had heard about that was coming, and I knew peripherally the director, but I didn't really know her, and I thought it was kind of a project that I would really want. And I do remember reaching out to people that were working on the project to kind of put my name into the ring for it. that, but that's kind of been a rare times. And maybe I should have done it more, maybe reaching out to people and letting them know what you're interested in doing might get you the kind of work that you're interested in doing. I think it's more like when you're starting out and you're just trying to get on any film set, it's like you might be working as a PA or as like the third grip or whatever that is, but when you start talking to other people on that set, they're also maybe just doing that temporarily, and maybe that other PA has like the feature film script that they've been writing for the last 5 years that's like amazing, and those connections that you make, even though they may not seem like they're immediate, may grow to be something down the road. It's hard because as a cinematographer, and especially when I was starting out, you want to do such a good job and you're just thinking about your job. And so I would come in and I would like basically be ignoring everybody else to just get to my crew, start the day, and really like just focus in on that thing. And that is important, but it is also important to acknowledge everybody on set. We're there, we're putting in time together. Everybody is a part of that community and building the thing and making the product. So it's like you want to make everyone feel welcome, and they'll do even the most they'll do a better job because they're feeling like their voice has a place in it as well. Yeah, I think I come from a place of a naturalistic aesthetic, trying to make that like a heightened naturalism. And also, as I was saying, I get a little bit bored, so more and more now I'm trying to challenge myself to move out of that and try other things. And that's what sometimes like a music video is good for, or other projects where I've come on as an alternate DP. I'm sort of following a lighting style of someone else that might be outside of my aesthetic. But yeah, where I came from, I think part of it was starting in documentary. You go into a room and it's like, how do I make this window and this one lamp or the one light that we're carrying work for me and make the best image? So those kind of principles, I think I carried through into bigger narrative things. And I try to kind of light a space as opposed to light every single shot. You have to kind of also acknowledge when someone's in a shot and it's not really working, when you need to bring in the tools and the lights to kind of help shape that. But I like to give the actor some space to move around and not, have to kind of exactly hit a mark. And if they're off, then it doesn't work, and those kind of things. I like to keep a natural flow as much as possible. For me, on a feature film with prep, I really love to have a lot of time. I love to like sit with the director and essentially talk about the script without ever talking about the cinematography one time, which can take you multiple days. It's like just talking through what the story is, what they find important, all those things, because you might read a script and think things are quite obvious, but to somebody else, other elements are really obvious. So I like to kind of like talk through those things and then kind of go back and do the ideas for the camera, for the lighting. Those kind of conversations start to happen, and then slowly you kind of do another pass of, okay, here's like a shot list. Here are actual ideas that we're going to implement. It's in TV, you don't get that kind of prep, I don't think, usually. But one thing I've also realized is when I first went on to a bigger show, I thought, this happens all the time. Like producers, the production team, they know what's right. They know what meetings are supposed to happen. They have everything lined up. This schedule is the way that it happens. And quickly I kind of learned, that's not necessarily right. Like, if I think that there's a huge car scene that needs to be discussed, it doesn't mean that someone's already planned a meeting for that. I have to kind of step up and go, I need a meeting to discuss the ins and outs of this car crash. Or I need, it's you having to figure out when to kind of like push for what you need and you want to do the job correctly. And again, in prep for TV, that's something I've tried to implement in like as much as I can. If there's a big sequence or there's something we need, I try to build time for production to let myself and the director go back to a location. Because often it's just an initial scout and then your tech scout. But I've tried to ask more and more, can we go back in between just the two of us, sit there, sit in the space, shot list, take pictures. I mean, it doesn't happen on all shows, but when I can, I really try to. I find that a really helpful thing for me in the process. I think for me, I just kind of like things a little bit imperfect sometimes. Like, it's just a personal taste thing that if someone is kind of 3-point lit and they're always got a halo-y backlight behind them and always the twinkle in the eye, I just don't love it as much. It's not as expressive to me. I think there are films that are lit like that and shot like that that I totally do love, and I respect it and admire it, but I just don't know how to approach a project like that. So there's a part of the kind of letting go of things that if it works, then I kind of embrace it. You know, if there can be a happy accident of something where a light is not quite aimed properly, but you know what, it kind of looks better, then embrace it, right? It doesn't have to be this idea of what the perfect thing is. But that at the same time, again, you need to know when to speak up, because there's been times where I've let things slide thinking, oh, they won't use that, or someone says to you, don't worry, we won't use that, that's not the thing, it's for this piece of it. And of course, like, it gets used and you're not happy with it, and you know, things like that do happen. So it's kind of finding, I still struggle with like when to kind of put your foot down and go, I know we're running out of time, but I need to do this thing. They're gonna look better, everything's gonna look better, it's gonna work better. But you also have to balance, like, when is it more about the actors getting the performance and getting the day done? Yeah, I mean, when I was working in Vancouver, it was, I mean, I think now there's a bit of a healthier indie industry, and there's more commercials and there's more varied types of projects. But when I was there, it was very service industry, and then kind of super duper student film indie shorts and things. So it was really hard to make a jump, because you're kind of doing your short films and then you're like, I'm not gonna get hired to make X-Men 7 or whatever is shooting, right? So there wasn't a lot in between. And when I decided to move back to Toronto, you know, there were a lot more kinds of work. There's lower budget TV, there's commercials, there's documentaries, and I started doing a lot more documentary work. But there was a period of time, like a few years there when I first moved, that it just was a really slow process. You know, you're sitting there, you're trying, you know, you have friends who have short films and things that you do, you want, you know, they're also struggling to get funding. You're at a stage where the people who you grew up with, maybe they have the feature film, but they're struggling to get that funding and get that thing off the ground. So you're kind of stuck too. And I definitely felt like I was kind of like not getting enough work to survive, and I was a little bit worried about what that would look like. And I think also, you know, looking at other people's work at that time and comparing myself to other people was really detrimental. And I just started to get into like a very dark place about it of, you know, this person started way after me and how come they're getting these jobs? And, you know, I had friends who were doing commercials and they would try to put me forward. And because I didn't have like, you know, an exact commercial of a family sitting at a dinner table, I couldn't get hired. And it was like, but I've done all these things, I've done this exact thing, but no one cares about your short film. Or at that point even, I had done a couple features and that wouldn't translate to that kind of work. So I found I was getting to be really down on myself for quite a while. And, you know, I think looking at stuff online was just like not a healthy way to do it. That's a scary thing about online, is you're kind of constantly seeing these things. You're seeing still images. You're not even necessarily watching the moving image. And when you look at some of that stuff, you go, oh, sure, you can pick 5 frames out of that thing that look killer, but the actual piece has got bumps and flaws and all these things in it too, right? We don't see that, and we kind of think everyone's doing these great, amazing projects. But, you know, I kind of had to take a moment, and I think I saw some very cheesy quote that should be like painted on a board in someone's kitchen or whatever, but like, other people's successes are not your failures. And I think I started, whatever that was kind of hit me, and I started to kind of come around to realize, you know, what I have makes me valuable to people. It's not going to be valuable to everybody. It's not going to be the right style or the right aesthetic or the right thing for every project, but the kind of people that I want to work with, hopefully it will be. And, I have only my experiences, my history, my upbringing, my references, the films that I watched growing up, all the things that I like, that makes me who I am, and that's going to make me different from the next cinematographer. And there's a value in that, and so I kind of just kept pushing through, and there was some rough, very broke years, and then slowly things started to come around. You get one thing and it leads to another thing, and just those building blocks start to actually pay off. I think when I first started and when I was in film school, I never considered that there weren't female DPs, and I think I'm glad that I started that way, not thinking of it as an extra challenge in any way. I didn't see it until I sort of started working, and then I think I did hit a point where it became harder to take that step up. And I think part of that was being a female. People were not used to seeing that. That's not what they saw when they saw a cinematographer. And especially when I looked younger, it was like people not taking me seriously. I remember going to another person's set and meeting this older established, I think he was an AD or something. And he's introducing himself to me, and he says, "What do you do?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a cinematographer." And he said, "Yeah, but what do you really do? What do you do for work? How do you," and I was like, "No, I'm a cinematographer." And at that point I was working, and I was, surviving off of that. And, those kind of things are just like people's mentality and the way they see it. And I think that the industry is shifting. My optimistic side of me is shifting, that yes, there are people of color, there are more women, there are, people from different backgrounds bringing in new experiences, and that's kind of making the industry richer, I think, too, right? We come at it with a different perspective, and that's kind of valuable, and I think it's going to help stories grow and become more interesting, to have more points of view involved in the storytelling of it. By the time that the industry started to shift and people went, "Oh, female cinematographers, we want one of those," I actually had a large resume, and I've been doing it so I could come with the experience that I needed. I think now I hope now people aren't as doubtful about women doing the job. I mean, I know so many amazing cinematographers in Canada that are doing it. I think for women coming in, what I was sort of saying is you bring only your own self and your own experiences. So being a female, you bring whatever that means to you. It doesn't necessarily mean feminine or whatever that is, but you bring something different. And so kind of just embracing that and bringing that to the job is a great thing. I think, again, when I first started, I was always kind of trying to be one of the guys, and it took me a long time to be oh, maybe I don't need to be that. I can just be me. And maybe if I like things that are more girly or feminine, that's not a bad thing, and maybe that's something that could be introduced into this project or that project. And, I found a great community. A lot of the projects that I worked on and were given opportunities were because they were very female-led teams, female producers, execs, directors who brought me in. And so kind of finding that community as well and coming up together is really helpful. And I see it in the younger generation. Women are just finding this network of, you can walk onto a crew and see a female gaffer, key grip, an entire lighting team that are women, and that's exciting. That's really cool, because I never saw that before when I was coming up. We have a really strong community that has grown in Canada, and I think mentorship is fantastic, getting to have conversations with those people, even if sometimes it's just one conversation. It can really be a helpful thing to just ask the stuff that's weighing on you and hear it from someone else. It's a everyone's different, so things like that don't always connect, and I think that's also a hard thing, is you have to realize that yeah, you might get one opportunity to have this job or for this mentorship opportunity or whatever the sort of like opportunity might present itself to you. It might not be the one. You know, there's a lot of failures for the successes that happen. And, you know, I made a lot of stuff that I never showed anybody, or I tried to bury very deeply because they were a bad experience, or I didn't like the product, or whatever that was. And that's part of the job as well, especially in this like current social media time, is you're also an editor. You have to curate and edit what you're presenting to the outside world and what you're showing people. So your reel is important, what you put on your website, what you put on Instagram. That's you showing your taste and your aesthetic. And although you might be doing other things, if you're not proud of that, or that's not kind of what you want going forward, you don't have to show it. You know, if someone asks for it later because they say, hey, can you shoot a Tide commercial? And you go, oh yeah, I have that thing that I've never shown anybody. Then you can bring it out and go, yeah, I can shoot a Tide commercial. But, you know, it may not be the thing on your reel, and it doesn't have to be.